order to maintain and to govern a nation. Ladies and gentlemen, but however, we think that when you allow individuals or a group of individuals to have more power than others in the forms of political influence on politicians who are the actors making policies to direct the way the nation goes, we think that is undemocratic and actually shatters the core principles and the purpose of democracy as a whole. And that's why we think that lobbying, allowing individuals to influence politics, apart from the way of voting, ladies and gentlemen, should be banned. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to basically talk about two things. First of all, I'm going to talk about the principle of democracies and the origin of that, why we think it is an important value that we must uphold. And secondly, I'm going to talk about the practical consequences. I'm going to talk about the fact that large conservative groups who are preoccupied with power are using lobbying, monetary donations and these kind of things in order to stop progress that is happening on the ground. Secondly, I'm going to talk about how minority groups, why we think they can still win and without lobbying, and like tyrannies of the majorities doesn't really happen in our side of the house. But before going into these points, I'm going to basically tell you precisely what we oppose and what we support. Ladies and gentlemen, we would say that lobbying, it would be things which directly approaches politicians and influences their supports of policies and these kind of things. It supports them on winning, it supports them on changing politics and these kind of things. So we point to examples like, for example, IT industries like Google lobbying politicians to not have regulations on IT industries in the United States. We point to, for example, like minorities lobbying a politician, donating and doing these kind of things in order to progress legal rights that they have. All these kind of things are lobbying. We would point to, for example, like giving political donations to politicians, that's lobbying. Or, for example, like directly talking to, if you are a group, you are the group leader directly talking to a politician, showing that I can have a lot of votes for you, and therefore you should listen to my votes. That kind of things will be also considered as lobbying, and so on. Now, but the thing is, we don't necessarily oppose, for example, like activists spreading information on the ground in the public sphere, starting debates and having discussions, showing that a group of people have these kind of concerns. These are the kinds of things we don't oppose. We are okay with debates happening on the internet and these kind of things, but the politicians shouldn't be approached directly from the people who support that kind of stuff. Well, we think that in our world, one person, an individual, should have one vote each in order to influence politics, and we think that is how democracy should work. Now, principle of democracy. We think, ladies and gentlemen, notice, like our favorite phrase, this is independent from the public, from the consideration of whatever, of practical consequences. I can't say it properly. But the thing is, if you look at the origin of democracy, where democracy originated from, we can see that it has a clear importance, our policy has a clear importance in this debate. Because we think that the democracy originates from the revolutionary times in France and in European nations like France, ladies and gentlemen, where people hated the rule by elite. In these cases, the king or the royal family of that nation. So in these kind of politics, what happened was a group of individuals who are preoccupied with power in terms of money, in terms of like their superficial greatness. They are the ones who ruled. So they had, even though they are one individual who should be given equal rights as other individuals, they had the right to direct where the nation goes without necessarily considering what the people on the ground says. So that's why they forced a revolution and then actually managed, then knocked the royal family out, and they formed a parliament, ladies and gentlemen. And in this parliament, everybody, regardless of where you're born, what your race is, whether you have money or not, they were given a vote each. So that now you can have equal consideration of the politics and people voting in for certain policies, and the majority's happiness would be the best majority of everybody. And that is why we think this is important. Now sit down. Now, why do we think that the status quo is against that? It's because individuals or group of individuals who form groups and have money can influence politicians and actually change the way the policies are formed. And we think this is completely out of what democracy had been or has been has been planned for, and therefore we think it is undemocratic in the first place. So next, now we'll move on to the consequences, but yes, Zach.
Okay, what is the exact difference between right to collectively express the opinion to the politician and individually express the opinion to the politicians?
Now, we don't really see an importance in differentiating these kind of things. A group can express their voices even in our paradigm. They can spread it out on the public and they can cause debate. Individuals can do the same. The thing is, you shouldn't be able to directly contact a politician and say that we are a group of individuals, we can actually support you, therefore you should listen to me. Because it means that a group of individuals are actually having more influence than the actual vote they are given, and that is what we oppose. So, practical consequences. We think, ladies and gentlemen, that lobbying is effective for parties which are clinging on to conservative values and the pre-constructed structural power that they have. For example, the church, like blocking gay marriage in Russia, ladies and gentlemen, or like the National Rifle Association in America, blocking the regulations on arms, even though pretty much everyone in America actually supports regulation of guns. They want to actually support protecting their own economic gains and these kind of things. Tobacco industries in Japan. We all know in Japan that tobacco is a social bad, ladies and gentlemen, but the thing is that they have a lot of political power, so the tax rate is far lower than other nations, and they don't have like grotesque images on tobaccos in Japan. So we think all these kind of things are actually going to be are actually against democratic will of the people, but yet because they have structural power, which are formed from like hundreds of years ago, they are able to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, they are using the power in order to fight against the rising will of the people, and that is bad. And that is why we think that like minorities can still win politics in our world as well, because minorities, first of all, can actively their voices are seen on the internet. They are supported by politicians who don't necessarily support them just because they have the money. Ladies and gentlemen, we think democracy is important, and this lobbying is against it, and that's why we propose. Thank you.
Just please next negotiation.
So, Mr. Chair, two things to be examined. First, we will examine why the political lobbying is a kind of legitimate action for the people from the perspective of autonomy or economy. Also, secondly, we will examine from their perspective of the democracy, why from democratic principle, why our side can much more able to protect the important principle of democracy than fairness. We think our side is much better in terms of fair democracy. For this reason, we are very proud to oppose the case. Before that, let me debate to the case of public debate. This is from the perspective of democracy. It's much better to have the public debate or etc. etc. But truth or here. Firstly, we think if the public debate is good and the public debate is enough, we already have the public debate, and most of the people or corporation prioritize public debate over this political lobbying in the first places, because in the many cases, in that political lobbying, they have to spend the money, right? And because they sacrifice their own resources, that is more harmful for the individual and the corporation. Therefore, this corporation or individual naturally has an incentive to prioritize to have the public discussion. Therefore, we think if public discussion is so enough, we already do that, we think. However, secondly, there are other cases where the public discussion is not enough to improve the right of minority. That is necessity or uniqueness of political lobbying. Because when this particular group of minority is something oppressed in the society, it's hard to make the public discourse in the first places. When this, for example, the minority people try to make the discourses, there is a risk there, like the attack or they're discriminated, there is a risk of backlash as well. For example, when they appear in the society as an activist, like there is a risk for they get the discrimination in the corporation they are working for, or they have a risk of the hate crime, etc. In that kind of cases, uniquely there is a necessity to have the public not the public discourses, but the private discourses, that is the political lobbying. Because this political lobbying is held, the closest classes, they say that is bad. We think this is because the closed classes, that is good. Because even minorities who are oppressed in the society are able to collectivize the voices, able to tell directly to the politician, and moreover, even they are minority, because the politician need money for the political campaign, etc., the politician has an incentive to listen to the voice of minority if the minority people can collectivize the money or resources or etc. In that kind of cases, uniquely outside the house, minorities who are oppressed in the society have a room to progress their voice. We think therefore comparatively, they say in most cases it might be true discussion is enough. However, for particular type of minority, we think that having the political lobbying is something necessary. That will stand from outside the house. First extension, why this utilizing the money is legitimate even in the political arena. We think it is an individual autonomy or autonomy of the organization how the money should be utilized in the first places, because these are consequences of utilizing money. For example, people are able to self-actualize, and people are also increasing utility or sometimes able to uniquely protect their fundamental right of individual. Therefore, we think this basically is crucially important for individual to have the autonomy to utilize the money or decide a way to use the money. And the logic is this: because if a social impact exists, this right should be limited. There is a remarks for the outside the house cases, democracy, etc. However, we think basically we can't draw the line what is legitimate usage of money and what is not legitimate usage of money in the first places. Why that's so? Because we think every kind of economic activity, every kind of choice to utilize money affect to the society negatively to some extent. For example, in the status quo, we already legalized to hire the private lawyer, but by hiring private lawyer, it will affect the result of court in the first places, and also another cases, we already allow to hire a private doctor, and because of having a private contract, sometimes because the rich people hire the private doctor, the poor people are unable to have the medication in certain areas, etc. However, we still allow that. Moreover, in general, the economic activity will affect the society negatively, like if rich people purchase the luxury goods a lot and this scarcity occurs, the price will increase. The poor people are unable to purchase in the first places. Therefore, we think we can't draw the objective line to what kind of economic activity is unjust from the perspective of social impact in the first places. Therefore, we think that we have to prioritize the right or autonomy or using money, and we think this line is very arbitrary line or distribution in the first places. Yes.
So if you believe that, if a really rich person becomes a dictator, would you support dictatorship?
Or we will deal with second analysis from the fairness and domination of rich people. So we think also from fairness or domination of rich people outside is much better, because there are two reasons why. Analysis or status quo. The first three, we think in the status quo, regardless of their rich or poor, the politician or candidate are able to have the right to run for office, right? Because even if the money is necessary to win the election, they are able to get the money from political lobby in the status quo, and also they have the choice to choose from what kind of corporation, what kind of individual, what kind of organization they gather money in the first places. Therefore, in the status quo, regardless of their rich or poor, regardless of their political capital, they are able to gather the money, and they are able to be fair in terms of monetary capacity in the first places. However, we think in after election, the rich people still exist, right, in the society, like billionaires exist in the society still, right? And these billionaires are still able to utilize a lot of money. And if the logic is true, money talks, money affects so much in the politics, we think that it will hugely advantageous for rich people in after production. Because in the status quo, the poor people are able to gather money not only from the rich people, but also from organizations that is collectivized, like the money or voices from all rich people people, but also poor people in general. We think in that kind of situation, the only rich politician but also poor politician can be elected. However, if the money vote is true, after transaction, these rich people are hugely advantageous in terms of the media campaigning, etc. Therefore, rather, domination of rich people will call on their side of the house that is rather counterproductive, rather hears from the perspective of fairness, that is the core principle for democracy. For this reason, we very hard to oppose.
Please, name and registration.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to basically talk about three things. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the principal justification we heard from the House about you should be able to utilize money in whatever way we want, and we think no. You can in most cases, but not in terms of changing democratic principles. That's our case. Secondly, I'm going to basically discuss this issue about closed discussions being the most effective ways in order to advance minority rights and why that is not the case. And lastly, I'm going to examine their examples about rich individuals. Ladies and gentlemen, we think that rich individuals are just an example in this debate, but we think it is a good example because it actually shows proves our side of the house, because rich people are the ones who are systematically blocking grassroots activities of poor people wanting more money, wanting more support from the government because of the gap of the lobbying power that these individuals have. First of all, let's move on to the principle. Basically, the justification was that pre-constructed power structures are justified. Individuals can use money in whatever way they want. First of all, I would say that that was just an assertion. It wasn't really backed up with logic. But secondly, it was just talked about through examples. Like, for example, if you're rich, you can do this. If you're rich, you can do that, and these kind of things. But the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, these examples are completely different from politics, ladies and gentlemen. You can consume in whatever way you want. You can order people to do whatever you want, not in terms of politics. Because politics is something that limits the economic activities of individuals, right? Politics can regulate to how much you can exploit the poor. It regulates to how much you can do whatever, ladies and gentlemen. And in these kind of politics, when these kind of politics are also affected by money, it means that there is no regulation on these individuals to do whatever they want. And that's what we mean by the preoccupied power structures being stronger and stronger and blocks people's rights. Ladies and gentlemen, we think that's a bad thing for them to say. But secondly, they told us that we can't really draw a line between these kind of things. First of all, like politics and economic activities, like that's a line, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, even if there was a really vague line, we think we provided you a reasonable case on our side of the house. We told you that the thing is, if you want to influence politics, you can do things like shouting on SNSs, like gaining a lot of people on the ground in the public sphere, ladies and gentlemen, but not necessarily supporting the politicians. If you want to change politics, don't lobby politicians. Influence other people so that you are now becoming a majority or a decent amount of group of people, group of people, so that you can actually have some influence on politics. And that is what we are saying on our side of the house. We think also that the point they support the democratic system in the first place, why shouldn't you make the best effort in order to become more democratic and the most closest to the pure democratic system, and that's a failure on their side of the house. Systematically, ladies and gentlemen, they are supporting autocratic rule by elites and the rich and the powerful. Now sit down. Second issue, ladies and gentlemen, about closed discussion, because they told us minorities can't win anything because they fear assassination, they fear assault, and these kind of things. But the thing is, they didn't really prove why closed discussion can actually change things. First of all, examples, we will point to the fact that black rights has been raised because people had campaigns in public, ladies and gentlemen. People fought for it with violence sometimes and through dialogue sometimes. But it wasn't done in closed backroom doors. It was done in the public so everybody could see. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, anything pretty much has been a result of public showing of people's support and people's wills. So I don't really think that can change. But the reason why closed discussion can't change is because if you are a minority, for a politician to say that I support my minorities in the parliament where there are so many other politicians existing, they need to justify their case. And it is very difficult for a politician to justify their case when nobody knows that the minorities are wanting for that support, ladies and gentlemen. So you do need a lot of people publicly debating about it in order to make a change. Closed discussion without public debate just doesn't help. So their analysis is wrong. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, about the rich and the poor. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they basically told us that rich people are justified in using money in whatever they want. But we say that the rich individuals are a good example to show the structural problems on our side of the house. Because, for example, rich individuals, CEOs of like huge companies, they lobby politicians so that they don't actually have more taxation, for example, on these people. So they move in for directions to secure their money and not necessarily redistributing it to the poor. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll point to the fact in the United States, 99% of the people have 1% of the wealth in the United States. 1% of the people have 99% of the wealth. Ladies and gentlemen, which is the more democratic? We tell you it is always obviously going to be for supporting the 99% poor people, ladies and gentlemen. But that doesn't happen necessarily in America because rich people are blocking politics by lobbying. They're lobbying, they're basically spreading out money in order to influence people's politicians' mindsets to support them, and they provide with reasonable justification for them to support. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an example to tell you why that example falls on our side of the house. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, the poor people also may form groups and may actually lobby politicians to some extent. But the thing is, they are lobbying it, even though they are in a large number, because the rich people are lobbying the politicians. So if you ban rich individuals from lobbying in the first place, you wouldn't have the need of like small weak people gathering around small amounts of money from individuals and lobbying rich politicians. So we think that lobbying in reality is only used for the preoccupied powers to maintain their powers, not necessarily for minorities to win back what they need. So ladies and gentlemen, going back to the minorities, because I missed that kind of in my first speech, right? We think the minorities don't necessarily need lobbying in the first place. Firstly, because rich aren't lobbying in the first place. But secondly, for some politicians who are really willing to support and stand up for the minorities, they don't need money in order for them to stand up and support the minorities. Maybe they're from minority backgrounds which share the same hardship, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, we think that we are moving towards a world where minorities' rights are being more and more respected, ladies and gentlemen, because we moved on from the power politics stage we had 20 years ago, and now we are in an era where people are seeing the information that some people are in need, and people can emphasize it, and that's why they're forming groups and actually having demonstrations on the streets. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what he has said. Thank you.
Unfortunate news for the government side in today's debate is that Donald Trump, who are the symbol of the exploitation to the poor and the gap between rich and the poor, publicly claimed he did not utilize the political lobbying and they do not receive these kind of political donation because he are already extremely rich and he already have the capacity to fight against these kind of election in the first places. We think in their paradigm, actually the collective gathering of the money in terms of fighting against the other candidate are lost in their paradigm, and only the such kind of purely rich people can win because they can utilize money, can utilize the political advertisement. We think this world is rather counterproductive for the minority people, and especially in the poor people, except for the rich person in the first places. We think this is massively disgusting world they are trying to characterize. So that's why we are very proud to oppose. We're going to talk about two things in my speech. Firstly, in terms of the principle of the democracy and why even in the context of political arena, we can applicable in terms of the freedom of expression and the freedom economic activity of the individual and the group of the individual. And secondly, I'm going to talk about the practicality of in which paradigm the world will be better off in terms of reflecting the minority voices and every single person's voices on balance. So firstly, in terms of the principle of the democracy. Firstly, they mentioned that our claim is that the freedom of the economic activity is important because this kind of diversity of way, guaranteeing the diversity way of expressing their will should be guaranteed, and this kind of utilizing money is also one way of expressing their autonomy. Their response is the and these politics always regulate this situation. Firstly, that this kind of counter-analysis must completely partial because their burden of proof in this debate is banning entire public political donation and political lobbying. We think that just because politics analogy of political regulation in the political arena is not so central in the first places And secondly, they fail to explain the exact reasoning why the politics can be the special one and exceptional one in the first places. The only reason is that because they are in the past there is a revolution from the elite politics, such kind of kings or the king's politics, and that's why in order to overweigh that this kind of rich person's politics, politics should be free from the economic perspective. We think that this is clearly counter my second point of analysis, which is the kind of only rich person can win after adoption. That's why we think that's why this is not so authentic in the first places. And more than that, in terms of the open discussion of this kind of open discussion of political arena is enough even after adoption. Like for example, Black Rights Movement. This kind of analysis is particularly exceptional. Firstly, the racial discrimination is perfectly different characterization of LGBT discrimination or this kind of discrimination against gender discrimination, because in the context of LGBT, lots of people are actually unfortunately in the closet, and this is not openly taken because public discrimination actually exists. That's why even though they have the courage to open their sexuality, but still they have the motivation to support this kind of LGBT rights movement. We think in this particular context, the only open discussion, the open demonstration is not extremely high bar for the LGBT rights movement. If the media cover this kind of LGBT individual, in these cases, the other working place people are actually realize they are LGBT, and unfortunately discrimination may happen. These kind of fear are extremely high bar for the closet LGBT people. But on the other hand, we say on our paradigm, we say this kind of gathering money for the representative of the LGBT, and this kind of representative can lobby the individual politician. We think in this particular situation, they can do this kind of, they can send the money by the very low bar compared with their paradigm. We think this is massively beneficial situation. Or in another example of the feminist movement, because we think that unfortunately, for example, in Japan, the feminists are sometimes utilized as a bad label of the women who are not such kind of have the good traditional gender role. We think this kind of letter are also fear such kind of potential closet feminists to go in the demonstration. We think this situation is massively high bar. That's why I say this kind of diversity of this kind of way of express themselves is also important. That's why we say open discussion is in and of it not only open discussion. We say the closet way of the expression is fundamentally important. That's why I say this kind of allowing the political lobbying is fundamentally important. And more than that, we say that this kind of closet discussion, the open discussion, cannot guarantee that who are actually agree with these kind of policies, because only the who actually are being affected by the demonstration or the open discussion is perfectly unknown after actually they become the politician, actually they after the showing the manifest. We think in this situation they cannot concentrate the voting power, because in the context of a closed discussion in terms of political lobbying, they can actually completely consent with this kind of groups opinion, and we think in this situation they can guarantee who they vote in the first places. We think this is massively beneficial consequences coming from outside the house. That's why I said that both open discussion and closed discussion should be guaranteed in the political arena, because these kind of individual have lots of the diverse situation. That's why I say individual should be choose how to influence on their political arena in the first places. So secondly, in terms of rich persons and poor other persons, we think in their paradigm the only who have the money, who have only the such kind of, for example, only individual or only such kind of political party who already have the money can win the election. Because for example in the United States the election term is very, very low compared with other country. In order to fight against the election and other candidates, they need a lot of money in order to utilize this kind of political demonstration, or in order to utilize political advertisement, in order to hire this kind of political vehicle. We think this situation is massively important for the individual who do not have the money, but actually have the group of the people. Like for example, JT, even though individual, the agricultural farmers are not that so rich, but the group of the people can represent this kind of their voices as a JT, JA. We think this situation is rather beneficial situation compared with this kind of rich dominated situation, because only the rich person can win the election in their paradigm. We think this is massively significant situation. We are very proud to oppose.
Just please, next, you are
So two things to examine. First, we will examine the dichotomic comparison between this type of discourse. There is a cross-discussion and open discussion, which is better. Second, we will tell you the fairness of politics. So firstly, the cross-discussion and open discussion. Their premise is open discussion is always better. However, the first three, their side is also a third, right? They just throw example of black or white cases, etc. However, we think they never analyze the reason why open discussion is actually better in the first place. Moreover, we think my partner and I already told you is much better. The individual or those oppressed minority themselves decide the strategy, what kind of strategy should be taken. Open is better, close is better, because this minority know to what kind of situation they are in, to what kind of situation they are oppressed, etc. Therefore, we think it's much better, because I already told you, because this sort of movement, there is sometimes risk of the victim in the first place, even if they say like the black movement is successful. However, before this black movement actually improved the right of black, there are a lot of bloodshed exists, and black activists has to die because of movement in the first place. Therefore, the member of movement has to compare which is better for themselves. We think, therefore, uniquely ensure the avenue of both cross discussion or open discussion. We think are much better than their side we have. Moreover, we think their side doubt that our side are unable to change in the first place. However, I already told you, if the money is so important in the politics, the politician has the incentive to get money, right? And if these gay people or oppressed people have so strong incentive to change the society, they have a so strong incentive to utilize their own money, huge proportion of their money. Therefore, by gathering this money, donating to politicians, this will incentivize the politician to change the nature of politics of mindset in the first place, because what they need is money, and what they lack is money. By giving the money, actually that will push the politician incentive in the first place. Moreover, we will tell you also the fairness of politics. There is a mention from their side house. So the assumption is like this: because in the status quo that only rich people marry, robbing many money, there is a problem. I am very curious for you. The first three, they never ever compare outside and inside, right? We think on outside the house, already my partner told you that only the rich people, but also middle class people, if they have a strong interest as an incentive to lobbying to the politicians, because number of poor people or middle class people are larger than these rich people, actually the money that is gathered by this organization is actually larger by just a handful of these rich people gathered. Mr. Speaker, that is why in the status quo, the JA, this is not composed by the rich people, actually get the huge amount of money to the politician in the first place. Therefore, we think on outside the house, also, not only JA, but also other, gay organizations are also able to gather a lot of money because these gay people so careful for the direction of politics in the first place. Therefore, in the status quo, comparatively, not only rich people, but also poor people, middle class people, as long as they have a strong interest, are able to affect the politics in the first place. However, in the separate nation, the failure from the outside house is they never analyze the how, if the money talks so much, if this rich politician exists in their paradigm, how the middle class politician, poor politician can utilize the media or cannot be disadvantaged position in the first place. They would think probably in the several election, the more politicians like Donald Trump or this billionaire have a stronger power because this middle class politician has no way to gather money, but rich politician still utilize their full of own money. Therefore, this domination billionaire will be worsened on their side of the house. For this reason, for the sake of fairness and also for the progression minority rights, we try to oppose.
In your speech, China is covered by India.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We think opposition falls on two key issues. First of all, it was unclear what they were trying to stand for in the first place. And I assume it was for the middle class who belong to, for example, JA and actually have collective power. We think in these kind of situations, it is a good example to show that JA, as a conservatively strong organization, is blocking, for example, individuality of farming, and they are forced, and the memberships are forced to continue with what the JA is saying. It blocks progress in, for example, like subsidies or protections on farmers and these kind of things, and that is a bad thing, because these farmers may well could have actually have moved on in a direction of individual farming, not necessarily reliance on JA, but they can't because of the power of lobbying organizations, strong organization lobbying, which causes the need of the poor and the weak to lobby back. And we think lobbying itself should be banned in these kind of situations. Second thing they have felt in this debate is that they didn't really tell us what democracy is in this debate. We told you that lobbying shouldn't be necessary in lobbying on politics in the first place, because we are all given one vote each, and there shouldn't be anything else that influences politics. So I'm going to talk about two things. First of all, about minorities wing, that is a good thing, the effectivity of closed-door discussions. And secondly, I'm going to talk about the principle of what democracy is. But before going into that, let me just rebut some new material provided by the member of the opposition, which was that the rich people are the only politicians who are going to win elections, and that is a harmful thing. But we tell you, first of all, that maybe if that is the case, like in many nations, why don't you, like for example, put a cap on the amount of money these politicians can use? And we think that solves everything, ladies and gentlemen. Why doesn't the state provide a substantial amount of money for candidates when they credit enough for becoming a candidate? Why shouldn't the state do it? But there are many things that can be taken in order to stop the harms that they have explained. So we don't really think that is an important argument in this debate. But first of all, Now let's move on to closed-door discussions, because that was probably the only substantive harm coming from their side of the House. They talked about how black rights movements are an exception from, and there was a wrong response on our side of the House. But the thing is, if you're talking about examples, like what about LGBT movements? They rallied on the streets. They actually had gay parades on the streets, and everybody saw it as a public movement. So that's what I think the example they told us actually shows that public debate is necessary in order to change. But secondly, they didn't really rebut our analysis that in order for a politician to raise a policy in the parliament and have a discussion, they need justification for that. And justification only comes from the public debate that is going on in the public sphere. And that is why we think that minorities can still rely on public debates in order to change. And we think that lobbying is not necessary. But secondly, in terms of the principle, even if all our analysis was wrong in terms of like the practicals, we think our argument our case still wins, because we talked about how democracy shouldn't really be influenced by any other thing apart from an individual having equal rights in order to influence this. You may well influence other people to support your views, but ultimately you would choose politicians based on equal rights. So you shouldn't really allow rich people, just because they're rich, that's because they're preoccupied with money, to influence and have more rights, more voting power than other individuals. And that is what the principle that we stand for. Ladies and gentlemen, we have told you that pragmatically, lobbying is used for the powerful to cling on to power, and we shouldn't need lobbying in politics in the first place. We should go to the closest possible to become democratic, and that's why this policy stands. Thank you.